care of. Oop, there we go. YouTube. Hello, everybody on YouTube. There we go. That's working. And then TikTok. And we are set. Today actually worked. Sometimes it's not easy launching the show. And I've got my mic on TikTok as well, which is a shocker. Good day so far. There we go. All right. All right. Woo. Oh, boy. Cold spring day. Here it was cold last night. It froze last night, which is unusual for here. But back to normal now. Hello, TikTok. Hello, Ashley. Everybody else. Hello, Blue. How are we all doing this evening? It's Wednesday, April 9th. I am good. What's going on, all? Greetings, Maria from Chicago. Anyway, hey, guys. Hey, Mark. Hello, Aricadora. Hello, user336. Good to see you. Vancouver. Yeah, DC is still a little cold. It's like 52, but it should be warmer. But what do you do? You know, and my allergies, I was saying, are I just ate some cottage cheese, which I've realized that milk triggers like a coughing allergy in me. Very annoying. Very annoying. Oh, that's pretty, Dave. Anyway, so welcome, guys. We've got a lot of news today. As always, there's a lot of Trump. Basically, the Trump and the economy and the tariff stuff is the big story today. Ukraine, there's some news, not a ton. Ukraine's kind of in a holding mode right now. I mean, the Russians are advancing slowly as always, but it's kind of a holding mode based on what's going on with these negotiations that are kind of going nowhere at the moment. But you know, the Russians are dragging it out. But we'll start talking about the U.S. economy, U.S. tariffs. Big news today. I mean, huge news today on that front. Very interesting. And then, as I said, we'll get over to the Ukraine stuff. As always, your gifts are very welcome. I do this for a living, so your gifts pay the bills. Particularly like the subscriptions. If you guys can subscribe, that's always nice. Basically, it just gives me a certain amount of money each month, which is kind of nice and useful and helpful. But otherwise, at least follow me on YouTube and TikTok and Discord. You guys are already there. But if you guys can follow, that's good anyway. Thank you, Cinderella, for the gift. Thank you, Lee Shaw. As I said, I'm going to be coughing tonight since I made the mistake of having dairy before the show. I was hungry and I had a little bit of cottage cheese. And I totally did not realize cottage cheese makes me go, I'll survive. But oh my God. There we go. So, yes, big story today. It's chaos in Trump land. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Blue. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Chazak. Trump kind of, sort of delayed the tariffs, but didn't completely and made them even worse on China and is going to go crazy on prescription pharmaceuticals. It was chaos day in Trump land. But the good news is Wall Street liked it. The stocks closed a lot higher. The S&P 500, S&P 500 went up 9.5% today. Some stocks went up as much as 25%. We are still down from where the stocks were before Trump announced the tariffs a week ago. Nonetheless, still, good that things are doing better. It's kind of chaotic, which is not good. So one of the things I've talked about a lot that the stock market cares about, that U.S. business people around the world care about, is predictability. It's having a sense of what's coming next, what's going on. And Trump, once again, today was the chaos president. He announced that he was lifting the sanctions, but not entirely, but leaving some sanctions. I shall go through this. So he's lifting the sanctions. Oh my God, all those crazy, horrible sanctions, they're going to be gone. They're going to be paused. Well, they're not gone. They're paused for 90 days. Sound familiar? Sounds like the TikTok stuff, right? He's going to pause them for 90 days and then they're coming back unless foreign countries do something that we don't know quite what it is. Remember, Trump lied about the tariffs, okay? Remember, he had a big sheet and he said how much each country puts tariffs on the U.S. and China put 68% tariffs or something on the U.S. It was a lie. Europe puts 40% tariff. It's a lie. Europe puts 1.2% tariffs on the U.S. Trump lied. So that makes it very hard to negotiate, because how do you negotiate getting rid of tariffs, for example, in Europe, when Europe doesn't really have tariffs on any of our products? How do you negotiate getting rid of those tariffs, right? It's a little confusing. In any case, Trump was going to put massive tariffs, or he did actually, on the entire world. He put a 10% base tariff on everything in the world, pretty much every country in the world, every product, more or less, and then added more. So Europe got 20% total, another 10%. China got 34% total, right? Vietnam got 40 or 60 or something crazy. He did to Vietnam, who also doesn't have barely any tariffs on us. Well, today Trump announced that those extra, he's keeping the 10%. So he's not getting rid of all the tariffs. He's keeping the 10% on everything. So everything is going to cost 10% more now worldwide from every country. That's bad because that will add to US inflation. And by the way, 10% increase in price is not small, right? I mean, we were all complaining that inflation was at 3%. Joe Biden lost the election because inflation was at 3%. And he's talking about 10% on everything. So anyways, Trump is keeping the tariff, which is the tax that Americans pay when goods come into the US. He's keeping it at 10%. He got rid of, for 90 days, the higher tariffs on every country except Canada, Mexico, and China. And he's postponing those tariffs 90 days. China, so every country will still get 10% tariff on all their goods from the US, which means Americans will pay 10% more to buy those goods from everywhere in the world. He then said that Canada, Mexico, and China will get punished more. Canada and Mexico, remember, we already had some tariffs in place with cars and some other stuff, but there were some exceptions. There were some 25% tariffs. Those 25% tariffs are still in place. The tariffs Trump put on steel and aluminum, like from around the world, those are still in place. China, Trump went extra, and actually China put 125% tariffs today. Thank you for all the gifts. So thank you, Mustard. Very nice of you. Lots of little gifts. Thank you. Appreciate that. Not even little gifts. Lots of nice gifts, actually. Thank you. On China, Trump put first he put 104% tariff. So China's the one country that really turned around and socked Trump as good as he got. The Europeans were ready. The Europeans passed something today that announced they were going to do pretty much equal tariffs to the US, 25%, give or take. And that is now going to be revisited because he lowered the European tariffs to 10%, right? So the Europeans are going to look at that again. But China basically said, screw you. China responded to Trump's tariffs by hitting the US with equal sized tariffs. So Trump responded and said, fine, we're going to increase our tariffs to 104% against China. And China said, fine, we're going to increase our tariffs to 104% against you. So Trump responded and said, fine, I'm going to increase my tariffs to 125%, he said today. Well, the Chinese are going to do the exact same thing. This is going to kill trade between our two countries. We're the two largest economies in the world. This is kind of a big deal. We do a massive amount of trade together. Smartphones, especially, electronics, especially. I read something else today that blew my mind. I don't know if I put it here. It's funny. I texted it to a friend. Let me pull this up. I texted this to a friend today. It was talking about, for example, what kind of stuff the Americans get from China. And first of all, smartphones, we know. Let me look here for what I texted my friend Matt. One moment here. Matt. Here we go. This was assistant professor of applied economics and policy at Cornell, Wendong Zhang, pointed out that the 125% tariff on Chinese goods would still have enormous repercussions for the American economy because many products that the U.S. imports are predominantly from China. 73% of smartphones in the U.S. are from China. 78% of laptop computers in the U.S. are made in China. 87% of video game consoles, everybody who likes their video games, 87% China. This one blew my mind. Toys, American toys, 77% of American toys are made in China. I had no idea. Those toys just got hit with 125% tax. If you don't think the price of your toys for your kids are going up, I got news for you. The cost of those toys in America just went up 125%. So if the toy cost $50, it's now going to cost $55. Excuse me. No, if the toy costs $50, the people who import the toy have to not just pay the cost of the toy, they've got to pay another $55 for the price of the toy. So that toy just went up. Again, the toy now costs twice as much for the people who make it, basically, when it comes in the US. And if you don't think you're going to pay more for those toys, you could possibly have to pay twice as much now for toys or more because of what Donald Trump did. But again, 77% of American toys come from China. Donald Trump just put a tax of 125% on toys from China. Good luck. A little bit more on this. What was this? Oh, He also said today he's considering exempting some American companies from some of the tariffs, but he's not sure. He's going to do it. When they asked him, well, what basis are you going to use to decide which American companies are exempt from which tariffs? He said, I'm just going to do it instinctively, just instinctively, you know. Oh, Calimera Pindos, good to see you again. He's also planning massive tariffs on pharmaceuticals. He announced that yesterday. That did not get a reprieve. Trump says that it's unfortunate that Americans buy so many pharmaceuticals, prescriptions from abroad. Mostly we get a lot of our generics we get from abroad. He thinks they should be made in the U.S. So he's going to massively increase the price of U.S. prescription drugs so that we can no longer afford to buy them cheaply from abroad, and we'll have to buy the more expensive American ones. That is literally Trump's plan. He's going to make prescription drugs more expensive for everyone in America so that we buy the American ones. Because, in other words, if it's no longer cheap, look at it this way. Pretend your prescription costs $25 to get a monthly prescription from India or something. And we don't know where it comes from, right? I just buy them at the store. I always thought my prescriptions were made in America, to be honest. I never even knew that they came from India and stuff. I just didn't know that as an American. I just assumed unless I buy it from abroad, right, that they come from the US. They don't. Well, imagine the prescription costs $25 and that's a prescription they get from India. Trump just is going to increase the price. God knows what. He could double the price of the prescriptions, maybe $50. Well, if he doubles it to $50, maybe the Americans can make it for $40 or $45. So what he's trying to do is, typically, if you can get a prescription from India for $25, it's not worth making it for $40 in America because the Indians will undersell you, right? But if Trump raises the price of the Indian drug to $50 in America, now Americans making it for $40, that actually makes money because, of course, you're going to buy the $40 drug instead of the $50 drug. The problem is, as a consumer, your drug was $25 and now you're paying $40 because of Donald Trump. This is crazy. Again, I'm going to reiterate this because this stuff is important, prescription drugs. He is going to increase the price of prescription drugs for Americans in order to force us to buy American drugs. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. He announced last night, he reiterated today and said, oh yes, I'm going to put a significant tariff on foreign prescriptions coming into the US so that people will be forced to buy American. Good luck, folks. If you're a senior, really good luck if you're a senior, but for the rest of us too, prescription drugs are already very expensive in this country. This is very bad. This was interesting too. As far as why he did this, he panicked today. His top aides, listen to this. This came from I think the New York Times. I think an hour or so ago, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, stood in front of the White House and said that the reversal on tariffs was the president's strategy all along. Trump then got up and said he made the decision this morning in response to the market turmoil. So they're trying to claim this was Trump's plan all along, except Trump got up there and said, I freaked out about all the bonds going. Actually, I'll talk about the bond market shortly. Trump freaked out about the bond market, about treasury bonds. And basically, countries were refusing to invest in America. And that's why he backtracked on the tariffs. He backed out because the market was doing so badly, because he screwed up so badly and hurt our economy so badly. A little bit more. And he admitted that today. He literally admitted today it was because of the bond market and people getting scared. New York Times reports that Diane Swank, the chief economist at KPMG, I think they're one of the big accounting firms, right? KPMG. And one of the many business economists who spent many hours calculating the impact of Trump's maximalist tariff plan that went into effect at midnight, only to have the 90-day pause on them announced today. Wow, what a bad sentence from the New York Times. Holy cow. A terrible sentence. Didn't mince words. She said, this is nuts. So this was a top economist talking about the damage Trump did to the economy and now whether it helps that he's put a pause on some of the worst tariffs. She said, this is nuts. The damage is done. Market relief is a head fake. It's like a fake, what we're seeing today, unless the administration makes a major course correction, she argued, adding uncertainty is its own tax on the economy. Omer Sharif, I love this guy's name, the founder of Inflation Insights, a firm that tracks the precise movements of prices across industries, New York Times citing him as well, says the increase to 125% on Chinese imports largely offsets the lower tariffs on other nations. This is interesting. He's saying because Trump is putting such a high tariff on China, and China is such a large part of our trade, it negates Trump lowering tariffs on everybody else, which is what he did today. Not lowering, he didn't lower. It negates Trump pausing the horrific tariffs on most other countries. That it doesn't help that he did that today because he's putting such a high tariff on China. And China, as I said earlier, we get so many of our goods from China. The other thing to keep in mind is a lot of people like U.S. farmers are screwed. I was watching this today. U.S. farmers sell a ton of their products to China, and they are screwed now in terms of the Chinese market. Also, U.S. manufacturing, my nephew was telling me today, U.S. manufacturing, a lot of American companies get their equipment for making stuff from China. A huge percentage comes from China. So the equipment that American companies use to make stuff, the spare parts to fix that equipment is going up in price 125% because of Trump's tariffs. So that's going to be very interesting for American companies. A little more here. He says, this was the inflation analyst. The increase to 125% on Chinese imports largely offsets the lower tariffs on other nations and leads to little change in the near-term inflation outlook. His outlook, to be clear, is the suboptimal scenario. He is saying that he thinks we're still going to have significant inflation and a slower growing economy at the same time. One second here. I already mentioned the fact that 87% of our video game consoles, 77% of our toys come from China. What else we got here? Oh, now one piece of good news is several of the folks who had forecast a recession are now saying that as long as Trump doesn't redo as long as Trump at the end of the 90-day reprieve doesn't actually go ahead with these tariffs, we may not have a recession anymore. They are saying, however, this was interesting. Goldman Sachs today, they said they're no longer predicting a recession because Trump is holding off on these tariffs. They said, we are reverting to our previous non-recession baseline forecast with GDP growth of 0.5% and a 45% probability of a recession. Let me repeat this. The good news is that Goldman Sachs says because of everything Trump is doing, we now have a 50-50 chance of a recession, that there's flip of a coin as to whether we have a recession because of Trump. And that's better than a guarantee of a recession. I agree. It's better than a guarantee. Trump taking an economy that was not going into a recession at all when he took it and putting us now that it's a 45% chance is pretty bad. The other problem is the economy was growing great under Biden. Remember, if anything, the only problem with the Biden economy was inflation. That's what people were complaining about. The economy was growing great. And if anything, the economy growing well was part of the problem. When the economy grows well, you have inflation risks. Well, Goldman Sachs is now saying that the U.S. economy is expected to grow at 0.5%. 0.5% is terrible. That is very, very bad. That is very bad. 0.5% is close to a recession, right? Close to no growth at all. As Tobin just said, we're expecting 3.7%. We were certainly expecting a couple percent at the very least, and we're now talking 0.5%, which, yes, it's better than negative. Hey, Jen, good to see you, but it's not great. Why did Trump cave the bond market? So this was interesting. I hate bonds. I find it very confusing. I don't mean bonds themselves, but I was sort of asking my cousin today and other people until I finally found a very good Washington Post article that was explaining why Trump caved today on the tariffs. Again, he didn't cave on all the tariffs. He postponed the worst tariffs for 90 days. He kept a baseline tariff of 10% on pretty much every country in the world, almost, other than Russia, of course. Right? Other than Russia, of course. But he kept a baseline tariff. Poppy, you didn't get the message earlier. Ash, do you want to reach out to Poppy? People like that need to be blocked. Sorry, you didn't see the conversation we had in the over at Discord earlier. Ash, if you can tell her privately why. As I was saying earlier, Trump wiped out, or he paused the worst tariffs for 90 days. He kept the bad tariffs on China, horrific tariffs on China. He kept the tariffs on Canada and Mexico. He also kept steel tariffs and other things. So the tariffs are not gone. He kept a 10% tariff on everything from around the world in every country, which is enormous. Again, I was actually, hold on. I think I've got I have the picture. I grabbed a picture earlier. Let's see if I've got it here. Oh, I didn't sync my iPad. Let's wait a minute. Oh, here we go. Is my iPad going to sync? There was a really good picture of the tariffs. Oh, this is annoying me. Okay, I thought I grabbed it. Well, let's wait and see. Maybe I didn't grab it. I thought I did. In any case, let's go back to this again. Hold on. Oh, the bond market. Okay, so we were talking about why is it that Trump caved today? Didn't cave entirely, but why did Trump cave today? He caved because the bond market was freaking everybody out. You've got stocks and you got bonds, right? I don't want to get into too much of an explanation of bonds because honestly, it confuses me as well. But basically, a bond is something you buy and you earn interest on it, basically, and you keep getting interest on it until you sell it. Now, you make money on a bond by getting the interest on the bond, right? Like maybe it's 4% or I don't know, whatever it would be, but 4% a year. But you also can make money if the price of the bond goes up or down. Typically, now again, I'm going to oversimplify. Typically, bond prices don't change that much, although they can change with inflation. I mean, with the interest rates. But typically, they don't change that much. Typically, as I said, you sort of invest in bonds because they don't change as much. You make some money, but not as much. But they also don't go up and down as much, so that they're typically a safer place to put your money. But again, over a long period of time, you won't make as much money with bonds. So that's why often you'll hear people talk about putting money in stocks so that over the long term, you get a big gain. Bonds grows more slowly, but if things turn down, they don't go down as much either, right? So anyways, bonds started to act up this week in a big way, and it started to freak out the stock market. It started to freak out financial experts. And this morning especially, bonds started to act very strangely, and Trump flipped out, and that's why he postponed the tariffs. I'm going to read you this from the Washington Post, a good explanation that I found about what happened with bonds today. Let me read you this. As Trump's tariffs took effect in the wee hours of Wednesday morning, something even more alarming occurred. Panic in the bond markets. Investors started dumping U.S. government bonds. They sold and sold and sold. This is not normal. Typically, U.S. government bonds are a safe haven. Whenever stocks tank or there's turmoil around the world, investors rush to buy plain vanilla bonds from the U.S. Treasury. It's the equivalent of chicken soup for unhealthy markets. But suddenly, those bonds turned bitter. Ultimately, Trump caved to the bond markets. He admitted to reporters that people were getting a little queasy in the bond market. There are a lot of reasons investors, likely including some foreign governments, wanted to sell. So basically, people were not buying bonds. What should have happened was stock market starts crashing. People are very worried, right? Oh my God, there's turmoil with Trump around the world and the markets are crashing. Let's buy bonds to be safe. People weren't doing it. And they know they weren't doing it in part because typically you buy a bond and the yield goes down, which is sort of the interest on a bond goes down. The interest was going up. The interest goes up when people sell bonds. So people were not buying bonds, even though we were in a period of crisis, even though we were in a period where stocks were going down. That's unusual. And what this article is going to argue is people weren't buying bonds because they kind of had enough of our government. And that's a very dangerous spot to be in because typically U.S. bonds are the safe place to invest. U.S. government bonds, especially, very safe. It's the place people seek out when there's problems in the world financially or otherwise. They buy U.S. bonds and they feel safer. This time, they were refusing to buy U.S. bonds. And that started to scare people because it started to say, did Trump do something that's changing fundamentally the way people perceive the U.S. government, not just the U.S. government, but perceive the U.S. financial system, right? Because if you don't trust U.S. government bonds, it's as if you're saying, actually, it is saying that you don't trust that the U.S. government is going to pay you for those bonds. In other words, when you try to sell the bonds, the U.S. government, you're not convinced the U.S. government is going to honor those bonds. Okay. Again, you see how it's a much larger, again, very complicated stuff. But the larger point was there was clearly a growing lack of trust in the U.S. government on a financial level. And that's incredibly dangerous to the world economy and to the American economy. She says there's a lot of reasons investors wanted to sell. Some wanted to invest elsewhere in the world. Others needed to exit bonds to have more cash on hand. But at heart, it all came down to the same belief. The United States is no longer looking rock solid. It's impossible to make sense of what Trump is doing, and it's not worth the risk of, the people selling bonds determined that it was impossible to make sense of what Trump was doing, and it's not worth the risk of finding out just how much will break because of his actions. Meaning, I don't want to hold investments in the US government because I don't know what this guy's going to do, right? For the United States, the repercussions of all of this could have been substantial and almost all negative. As investors sold bonds, the yield, the interest rate soared. The 10-year Treasury yield, this is interesting, by the way. I'm going to read this to you, and then we'll talk about it briefly. The 10-year Treasury yield, the interest rate on bonds, hit 4.51%, up from 3.9% earlier this week. And the 30-year Treasury yield briefly topped 5%. This couldn't be worse for Main Street. So the main point to take away from that, and we'll talk again, is the yield, the interest rates on bonds started going up because people were selling them. And it's complicated, but that's the way bonds work. When you sell them and people aren't buying them, when demand drops for bonds, the interest rates, the amount you're willing to, that they will give you if you buy them goes up because it's trying to basically lure you into buying them. So the interest rate on bonds started to skyrocket this week, especially this morning. But that was a sign that everybody was dumping them. I'm going to call it interest rate because it's too hard, Martin, to call it yield. It was a sign that people were dumping U.S. government bonds and dumping the U.S. government. But listen to this. This couldn't be worse for Main Street. It means mortgage rates may top 7% again, and the borrowing cost for cars and businesses will surge. It also means the U.S. government will have to pay even higher interest costs. Let me explain this. Your mortgage. People often think that the interest rate for your mortgage is tied to the Federal Reserve. I forget if it's called the federal funds rate or what do they call it, but the interest rates that the Federal Reserve sets, right? That we always have that every 3 months, there's that story of, is the Federal Reserve going to change interest rates, right? It's not directly related to that. The mortgage rates are related to the 10-year bond and the 5-year bond, Treasury bonds, and what the yield is on those. It's, again, way over my pay grade on this, but I see we got the trolls again. Did study in graduate school at Georgetown, where I got my master's in foreign service and my law degree, studying international economics. So I probably know more than some people. But again, I'm not going to claim I'm an economist, but you do learn something going to graduate school at Georgetown and studying international economics. It kind of by osmosis. But what happens is when bond interest rates, when bond yields go crazy high like they did this week, and especially this morning, that means mortgages are going to start going higher. It means the rate you pay on your car loan is going to start going higher. It means the rate the U.S. government pays on all of the massive amounts of debt we have is going to go higher. That's another reason everybody started freaking out, because that's obviously very bad, right? So it's part of the story is investors from around the world were starting to show that they no longer trusted the U.S. government financially, and that could have led to a huge crisis. But at the same time, we were seeing that mortgage rates and interest rates were about to go through the roof, and people were going to freak out if that happened, right? It would hurt the market. It would hurt Americans. By the way, that would also help cause the economy to crash again. Anyway, it's a really good article in the Washington Post. I don't know. Thank you, Andrew. I don't know if folks subscribe to the Washington Post. I do, but it was a very good article. You can find it. Maybe they give you some free ones every month. I don't know about that. But it's very interesting. As I said, I find the bond thing a little confusing. Is it paywall? I wasn't sure, Lisa. Is it in the old days, they used to give you like 10 articles a month. They don't anymore. That's too bad if that's true. Okay. Well, I summarized it and read a lot of it for you. But as I said, the bond market stuff is getting into some high level finance for my tastes. But I thought James Bond, exactly, Amanda. It's today's paper. Yeah. It was an article. You'll know it by the headline. It's on the homepage of the Washington Post. It says something it's an opinion piece, but it says something about the bond market and the trouble it's going to cause. You'll find it. I mean, well, okay, you know what? I'll pull it up and find it for you guys because it is really good. Hang on. Washington Post. La, la, la. Come on. All right. Hold on. I subscribe. I don't know if I've got the actual Washington Post app in here. Let's see. Otherwise, I'm just going to go to their website. Wash Post. I do have the app. Oh, it's downloading it. Don't be evil. Don't make me log in. All right, let's see. Hopefully it's not going to make me log in. Let's see. But as I said, I want to show you this because it was really good. Okay. There we go. All right. I'm going to see at top stories if it's got it. It should have top stories. Yes, this is great. Okay. Washington Post homepage. Okay. It's right here. It's like the first story they link to. U.S. Treasury bonds are being sold off. Here's why it's concerning. So it's literally the first story on their website after the big story. You click it and voila, it's from Heather somebody. Oh, this is a different guy. Oh, this is a different one. This is actually a different article. Okay. This is a different article, but he's probably good too. This is a different guy. This is Andrew. This was a Heather woman who wrote the other piece that was very good. That's actually a different piece. Okay, well, I don't know where the one is that I read, but I'm sure the one with Andrew. Oh, here it is. This is the one that I read. It was an opinion piece by Heather Long. Trump caved on tariffs. It took a scary bond market freakout. That's the article that I think is written very well. Thank you for the gifts there, guys. I do see them. That's the article that I think is written very well. The Washington Post also has a general article up about the bond market. My suspicion is that one might be more complicated if it's written for more the financial folks. I thought that woman's piece was very good. So